and welcome to Find, Tell, Share, the Storytellers podcast. My name is Jemma Rosenthal. I'm a creative coach. I'm a business called Creative Hearts, and I help people to find their voices. I'm also a singer, songwriter, actor, and dancer. And this is
Chris Sissons. My business is Market Together. I'm a local marketing coach who specialises in using stories for marketing, business development, and finding the real work that only you can do. And today I'm delighted to introduce David Mowat, who is a community worker and trumpet player who's experimented this last 20 years in using music and story to build community across differences. Notably, he's tried to bring black and white working class experience in a historical show about the cotton plant in Bristol, and the show was called King Cotton. More recently, he's focused on Palestine and Gaza. Hello, David.
Hello. The cotton plant in Bristol. There's not much cotton growing in Bristol, but the cotton plant worldwide, and as it was sort of disseminated through industry and globalization and so forth. But yes, more recently I've been working on Gaza, Palestine, Bristol, Israel, and so forth. That's right.
Yeah, and am I right in believing that you walked all the way from Bristol to Jerusalem? A few years back.
Believe it. Belief's a funny thing. That's a great thing to believe in. I walked about a third of the distance, not the whole way, and the rest of it was hitching, and there was the odd coach ride. There was even a bit of a bicycle at one stage. So yes, I got there by hook or by crook, about 15 years ago.
So 15 years ago. So why did you do that? Because most people don't suddenly get the urge to walk to Jerusalem.
Well, there's the forward end was the interest in the draw of Jerusalem and the story of pilgrimages, and the beginning bit was a breakup with a relationship. I thought, oh well, I've got an opportunity now. There's nothing holding me back. And the middle bit was just the sheer enjoyment of walking every day. You know, sleeping under a tree here, in a field there, in a tent, being put up for the night. It's just very enjoyable.
Yeah, and your companion was your trumpet that opened doors for you.
That's right. I cuddled my trumpet every night. Very obliging. A little bit small. Okay. It's a pocket trumpet, so it didn't cuddle as well as my normal one.
Yes. Well, I mean, David's basically blown his own trumpet all over Europe and the Middle East, I suppose, and it's brought you into several different bands, hasn't it, over the years?
Yep.
I'm trying to remember what they're all called. I think the first one I remember was the Klezmer-Nauts.
Yes, that's right. And that actually brings me into the topic of the story, because the Klezmer-Nauts is my Jewish friend introduced me to klezmer 30 years or so ago, and it was a new form of music for me. And then I thought, well, it sounds a bit Middle Eastern, and of course that's where it draws some of its inspiration from in the Mediterranean world. It's the music of East European Jewry as it came to America, and it got mixed with jazz. It's a brilliant form, and politically speaking, it's a form of music that belongs to a Jewish cultural world that is distinct from the Israeli Jewish cultural world, and also politically distinct. It stands for diaspora Jewish life over the millennia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now you're part of. Is the Bristol European Jazz Ensemble still going?
Yes, it is. It's been really tricky through lockdown. All the gigs are cancelled.
Yes.
So a project leader, sort of band leader like me, has to sort of scratch his head and wonder how do you keep a thing going when there aren't any gigs. So what I've done is I'm working now on an album project with the trio version of Berger. That's how I pronounce it, Beje. The trio version being double bass drums and myself, and we're working with a kora player, a Senegalese kora player. Who's made his home in Bristol, and we're calling it the Bristol Griot. We're redefining through storytelling and music what it is to be a griot, which is a kind of traditional West African bard. It's a sort of bardic role where you keep genealogies going and you tell the histories and you praise the ruler. It's that kind of tradition. What does that mean in Bristol, in an urban setting where he doesn't have status? It's a fascinating project, and I'm just about to start an Arts Council application.
And I remember I went to the Library Theatre in Sheffield a couple of years ago, and saw your musical. Now, what was it called? Balfour?
Belonging, and Balfour. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's right. And that was about the Palestinian situation and the reason why they got into that situation through the Balfour Agreement. Is that right?
That's right. That's kind of a third of the story. Well, half the story. The other half being, of course, the creation of Israel. The main inspiration was an autobiography of Chaim Weizmann, who was one of the key Zionist pioneers, politicians who helped generate the creation of the State of Israel. And yes, the other side of the coin is at the expense of indigenous Arab, now known as Palestinian communities. And that's what brings me here to this podcast. That's my story I want to offer.
Well, let's hear the story.
Okay. The title of the story only came to me this morning. There's two people's voices here. There's my own voice, and then there's the voice of a woman called Reem. Sometimes she's known as Reem al-Najjar, which is the clan name. And Reem and I just had a little chat on Messenger this morning, and she said to me, just one sentence, she said, "I hope that you relate our suffering, my good father." So the story is about how I came to be adopted as a father by Reem, which is quite topical, really. If you think that the Christmas story is rather confused about paternity. There, on the one hand, there's Joseph, who's sort of soldiering along rather quietly. He doesn't get that many mentions. And we're told he's not the real father. The real father is God or the Holy Ghost. So it's slightly strange. So this season, I've been adopted as a father. Reem's not my biological daughter, but I've kind of reached out to her, and in the process, she said, I'm going to call you Dad. And the story is about my search for relationship with people beyond activism. It's all very well saying how dreadful things are in Palestine with the occupation and the driving of Palestinians out of their homes, but when it's just one succession of horrors after another, we lose connection with the people. So I'm striving to find a human connection that can build empathy and not build a feeling of recoiling from it. I'm trying to look for art that's beyond politics, feelings beyond facts. And I begin the story with a poem. I visited the West Bank, the occupied West Bank, last in 2019, which was the year after the show you talked about, Chris. And in 2019, I met Mahasaka, who's a woman in her 60s who runs an emporium in Bethlehem. I expect many tourists meet her. And if you're lucky, she'll bring you deep into her shop and show you her most precious possessions, which are ancient wedding dresses that were given to her or she bought off poor refugees, elderly ladies who told her their stories of the Nakba, of being driven out of their homes in 1948. And sometimes the only thing that they could take with them, their most precious possession, was a wedding dress. So this inspired me to write the following poem, and I researched it using a book that some years before I had taken out of Israel. It was a book that aroused a lot of suspicion because it was inscribed in Arabic. The bookseller in an old souk in Jerusalem had inscribed it in Arabic just to say, you know, I wish you well and I hope you enjoy this book. And the Israeli border guard couldn't read the Arabic and thought it was very suspicious. And I was detained quite a while because of this inscription. In the end, they let me go. And then years and years later, so it sat on my shelf, I used it to research this poem. And the other bit of the research was old photographs of the beach in Yaffa. And the other thing to say about this story is that during my time in 2019 in April, when I went to research, I was researching stories from Palestinians about their experiences. And one of the ladies, a young student, said, my grandmother, who's now living in Old Jerusalem, came from Yaffa and always talks about Yaffa with great fondness. Ah, Yaffa, Yaffa, which is a coastal town known as Jaffa, still with some Palestinian population, but mostly Israeli. Most people were driven out. So here we go. How I came to be adopted as a father. And this poem is called the Quabbeth of Yaffa. Quabbeth is the wedding dress. An old lady is speaking to her daughter. Fetch me my thob, Habibi, from the old chest with the silver clasps, and sit down here with me and listen to my story. Ah, Yaffa, Yaffa, how I miss you. I loved to run free as a gazelle, Habibti, past the camels, resting, and the boats pulled up on the beach. Splinters of the morning sun dancing in the sea, my bare feet in the surf, the wind in my hair. Or walk in the cool moonlight through the orange groves with the scented blossom, quickly past the dark shade of the cypress, and sit at Mama's stool, embroidering this Quabbeth. What do you see in it, Habibti? All that I saw in Yaffa, a coffee bean, orange petals, a moon like a pointed star, the Pasha's tent, our house with 2 stories, with a ladder to reach, and feathers everywhere. And looking inland, the rising mountains of Al-Quds. How my eyes strained and fingers ached, till Mama made me go to bed. And I'd dream of the day the merchant would cut the cloth and I'd ride to my bridegroom on my white horse. Then the Jews with guns came, and we crowded the boats, my precious Quabbeth, in my stool satchel, until, sick from the waves, we landed safe at Gaza. So, my dress was made, though my mother didn't live to stitch on the pieces, and it's not the linen of Majdal, but what the souk provided. Keep it safe, Habibti. This will be your wedding dress, inshallah, and your daughter's, for the day will be free from the river to the sea. More recently, I've been trying to make connection with people in Gaza. It's very, very difficult to get in and very, very difficult to get out. It's under siege. So I've been making friends with people through Facebook and Messenger. And I've made friends with a woman called Reem. She says, "My name is Reem and my children are Khaled, aged 10, Emad, aged 8, and I have a little daughter, Dania. My husband is Mohammed. On the day of the Nakba originally, my family came from Yaffa. Now we live in Khan Yunis." So that was interesting. She came from the village where I had researched and written that poem, and I talked to her about it. And she explained more things about the village she came from, which was very, very near Yaffa. It's a village called Salama. She's told me her family are descended from these refugees, and they were kicked out on April the 25th, 1948. She sent me a history book extract. It was a village, as the poem suggests, with fields of citruses, irrigated orchards, with grains and olives. It was nearly entirely destroyed, leaving a mosque building, cafes and some houses, all in a terrible state, apart from the ones occupied by the newly arrived Jewish Israeli families. And now it's part of a Tel Aviv suburb. It was quite busy in the British Mandate. There was a soccer team, there was a transport company, a few Christian families, mostly Muslim. And now the descendants of that village number 50,000 in Gaza. She's one of those descendants. So Reem recently told me the story of the death of her father. And that's the next story I'm relating to you. My story must reach the whole world, for everyone must know how the Israeli occupation kills those who were once safe in their homes and who themselves have never sinned. On Wednesday, 23rd of July, 2014, my civilian family, my father, my mother, my little brother, my older brother and his wife, and my sister with her children and her husband were all safe in their home. They were given no prior warning to what was to happen next. They had nothing to defend themselves with. They heard the sound of a whistle shaking the house. It was the Zionist occupation warplanes. A missile tore my family apart, and my father died instantly. Others were injured. This is the reality of an arrogant occupation against innocent citizens. I received the news of my father's death as I listened to the general news on my television to reassure myself about what was happening in our country. Urgent martyrdom of the citizen Ismail Abu Zarifa and the wounding of everyone in the house by a missile by the Israeli occupation planes. Can you imagine that? I was shocked and passed out. I walked to the hospital, panting and crying. I did not believe what was happening. I did not understand how my compassionate father, so tender and kind, who treated me with love, kindness and respect, with whom I had a great relationship, and yet I wouldn't be able to meet him again. How could he die? It was not clear. Nothing was clear. I could not see him. It was so painful. My middle brother had asked the paramedic, "Who is this martyr?" He replied, "Ismail Abu Zarifa." With cries of shock and grief, he exclaimed, "Oh, my father!" And he fell to the ground. His mother and sons fell too. People always ask about our father. When they receive the news of our father's sad and terrible martyrdom, I feel such sadness. This is the reality of the occupation. My family and I still suffer from this unforgettable incident. I will not forget it as long as I am alive. It is present in all our memories, and our tired bodies because of the injury of this trauma. It will always remain, for the conditions we live in so far, being under siege of poverty, hunger, injustice, and intimidation of our faith. This wound is still bleeding from this dangerous incident. And since then, Reem and I have corresponded since she relayed me this story some months ago. And she's described other things going on, the arrival of the coronavirus, the difficulty of getting supplies, the chronic illness of her children. But through it, there's an amazing resilience that comes through. I help her with small bits of finance where I can, and I've written up her story on my blog. And she's come to call me Dad. It's not something I've sought, but there's a relationship there, and I guess that relationship, to some extent, can help transcend the siege and the barriers between Reem and myself. That's the end of my story.
Wow. Thank you so much, David. It's such a powerful thing to be able to talk about her and tell her story on this podcast. So first of all, just want to thank you for using this platform to do that so that her story can be heard. And I think you told it with such delicacy and compassion. I think
Thank you.
It's really inspiring.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, yes, it is, and have you told the story in podcasts or audio before, David, or is this a new?
I told it once in a just before the national lockdown in October. I told the story in a I think it was a live Zoom, what you call a live Zoom thing in a church in Cotton, Bristol. So yeah, I've relayed it once before, but that was a live setting, not a podcast. I'm not done that before.
Yeah, it can be difficult to tell someone else's story, but the fact that you've got that relationship with Reem is, I think, makes it possible, and that's very interesting. One of the things that struck me, particularly in the poem, but also in the story that followed, was the great sense of place. You talked about all manner of things, but the orange blossom, boats on the beach, feet in the surf. Can't read my handwriting, so hopefully this is but particularly the orange blossom and the petals of the blossom and so on, it actually makes the whole thing very vivid. I mean, we're all imagining different things, but it still gives a very real sense of place. And I thought that in itself was moving, even before you get, it's the backdrop to the tragedy in a way.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important to the story.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
go on.
Well, the wedding dress tradition is very. I've not researched it widely, so I don't know if other cultures have this as well. But it's very particular in Palestine. We talk of Palestinians, but people come from very particular places, and they literally embroid the memories of those places in different ways in different places. And the description that I made was based on an interpretation by a specialist of a Yaffa wedding dress, and this is what. So any Palestinian would be able to know where someone came from because of what was embroidered on the front. The Quabbeth, actually, it was not the wedding dress. It's the square piece on the front of the dress that a Palestinian woman wears for her wedding, and then keeps and hands down to her daughters. That's the tradition.
Do you have any photographs?
Not here, not right now, but I do have some photographs. I think I stored some photographs of Yaffa. I have a picture of the camel on the beach. If you imagine them,
the camel.
Coming up, and the boats lined up, and it was a sunny day. So I think that particular image came from seeing this photograph.
Yeah. Well, if you got an image of a wedding dress, we could use it with the blog. But those who are listening would have seen it if we've managed to do it by then.
Okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
Any
more comments?
Another thing you could do is perhaps send us the poem so that we can have it written down as well. That's another option of something so that our listeners can, have it to read as well. If you want to.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah.
But it was very moving.
It's a tough old story, isn't it? I'm just grateful for the opportunity to reach out. I've been involved in such a lot of activism, and I'm tired myself. I'm sick myself of the negativity that goes with it, and some of it is inevitable. It's generated by the situation, but we have to always remember we're human beings, and we can be moved and engaged something beyond horror. And a lot of lefty activists, I include myself, we kind of bang people over the heads with negative images, and then we're surprised when people are sort of turned off and disengaged. I think art, that poem and my relationship with Reem and the storytelling is just a great way to reconnect people with something that's just like, it's a very human story.
Definitely. I think I can't remember what TED Talk it was, but I saw a TED Talk by a Palestinian, and she was talking about exactly the same thing as you were saying, about making it more human so that people actually know the stories behind the people. And I think that's what's so great about what you've been able to do is, we can hear about horrible things that are going on, but I think when you make it human, that's when the connection happens. And that's where we can really care about people and then want to help. I think sometimes people, I suppose, think, it's like the way that people are moved to help it's often a bit more, it's emotional and personal. When people are moved to help, it's because they feel something. And sometimes, it can be, I don't know if the word's off-putting, but it can feel overwhelming to just be shown loads of horrible images, and you just think, well, what can I do? Kind of thing. But when you're shown a personal story, it's something that we can all relate to and think about. Okay, because now I'm intrigued. I want to, read more stories and know more about people, and then that inevitably that can lead to them being able to support people more.
Yeah, and the story really brings that point out because she hears of her father's death on the news. Yeah, and a news bulletin would never can't replace the actual personal story.
Gosh, yeah.
And that personal experience. So I think that's really the pivotal point in the story. It's not so much that her father died, it's the way she heard about it and having to cope with all of that. There's that impersonal world of media and communication, and then the the things that are going on in the heart.
Mm. It's that's I hadn't made that connection, Chris. That's a good insight. And she chose to tell me the story in this way. That's a part of the way the experience has burned in her, is how she heard about it. It's just because Gaza's not sort of one place where everyone knows everybody and they're all living in one big town. It's a spread out it's conurbation, a mixture of conurbations of nearly 2 million people. And so she's in one side of it, and her dad was in a tower block, an apartment block in another part, and that's how she got to hear about it. Awful. Mm-hmm. So some aspects of Gaza living are really we can connect to. We can connect with the anonymity of city life, hearing things through news, getting bored, looking at social media, so. Stories really, connect people to each other. I want to just very briefly say, I hope I'm not demonizing people who are barely mentioned. So this is the people in Israel, or the Israeli perpetrators. In the poem, I mentioned Jews with guns. That's a specific description of. This is the phrase which I've heard in Palestine about particular people who were Zionist militia who carried out these atrocities and drove people away. So I'm careful. I try and be careful in the stories I say, not to demonize a whole people, a whole group, and ultimately, Palestinians and Israelis. Do I mean many try and do, and in time many more will have to live alongside each other and be human beings together in whatever final arrangement that is. That's down to the politics of two state, one state, whatever it is. So I hope I'm focusing on one person's story, but not by implication demonizing another group of people. I'm trying not to do that.
Mm-hmm. No. But it's entering into that mindset of Reem's mindset and understanding what motivates her, and that's the key thing. I'm sure you could find similar stories on the other side of the divide.
Yeah.
In fact, yeah.
Yeah, I probably could.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so how do we move on from there, Jemma?
I know, I'm trying to think, because it was such a moving story, and so basically today, Chris had a different idea for this session, to do something slightly different because it's Christmas, and to just shake things up a little bit. So me and Chris have both brought stories with us to tell. So my story is about the first time I tried to sing on stage. So it does have I guess quite a different tone to it, and it's how to move into that graciously and empathetically, if that makes sense. But yeah, I'm a vocal coach and a life coach. So I kind of blend the two in my Find Your Voice sessions, which Chris has experienced a bit of. And Chris helped me to find some stories, because Chris is a marketing coach and he coaches people one-on-one to help them find their story. So this was part of that, was for me to have a look at my life and think, what stories do I have where it's a story of me finding my voice, basically. And this one is when I was very young. We're starting at 11 years old, and it's Christmas. I'm stood on a stage. It's afternoon. The room is bright, and me and my Y6 classmates are dressed with lots of tinsel and Christmas costumes, ready to start the performance of a play. which I'm going to be singing. There's gatherings of mums and dads and sisters and brothers, grandmas and granddads, aunties and uncles in the audience. And they're all looking up at us as we're about to begin a performance. I'm feeling anxious, annoyed and frustrated. And I'm in a bit of a mood, and many thoughts are rushing, and I'm predicting the worst. It's going to be awful, I think. I wish that they could know my true voice. As the music starts, I open my mouth to sing, and a dread fills my heart. Remember the last time you tried to sing in front of the school? Now, the first time I'd set out to sing in front of the school was a previous year, and I was 10 years old. I was fairly confident in my abilities, and although it would be my first time performing a solo song in front of the school, I'd been practicing, and I'd even used the song at my audition for a local production of Bugsy Malone. This concert was in a different hall, which was medium-sized and had colourful pictures and curtains, and a slightly warmer glow lighting, as it was evening. I'd decided to do the blousy song. I'm feeling fine, filled with emotions. And my teacher, Miss Scarborough, had agreed to accompany me on the piano. As the audience gathered into the hall, a light murmuring of curiosity and excitement, I felt prepared, calm and ready to sing, just as I had in the auditions previously. It was only as I was walking onto the wooden floorboards, which for some reason were not the raised stage as usual, feeling very small, and I was a small 10-year-old. I was now looking up and out at the many faces of the audience, and I started to feel very aware that I was being watched by all these people. I noticed in front of me one of the audience was a girl from the year above me with distinctively long hair, and she was staring back at me, waiting to hear me sing right in the centre of the audience. I felt nervous and my breath became shallower because this girl was a good singer too, and I remembered watching her sing opera confidently in front of the whole school assembly. Me sat on the floor staring up at her with a mixture of awe and jealousy. I could do that, I thought to myself, determined as ever. It was always my dream to become a singer, and so this moment was important to me, a chance to share my voice and show the school what I could do. So I'm now looking out anxiously at the audience, and I'm distracted and my thoughts are clouding me. What if I don't live up to her performance? What if I'm not very good and everyone laughs at me? Miss Scarborough starts to play the piano, ready and expecting for me to go into, I'm feeling fine, filled with emotions. But I was frozen, on the spot, feet glued to the floor, dry-mouthed. I find that no sound's coming out. Instead, for whatever reason, perhaps a mixture of nerves or the memory, the pressure of living up to proving my singing ability, that this causes a sudden burst of laughter to come out of my mouth and then turns into a gush of tears. And I rush off the stage, unable to sing. I ran towards my parents, feeling embarrassed and like I'd completely failed. How was I going to fulfill my dreams to be a singer if I couldn't even sing in front of the school? 10 years old and my first singing solo, and I was disappointed. I did receive some hugs and comforted and kind words from them, and the rest of the show continued. I hadn't got to sing, and to top it all off, later that evening, my sister was rushed to hospital after cracking her head open on a wall, causing what we would later refer to as her Harry Potter scar. The mayhem of it all meant that I didn't really get to process my feelings of the moment, And of course, in this instant, and rightly so, my sister's needs were far greater. But something inside of me had also cracked open, and perhaps I wasn't as confident of a performer as I thought. Perhaps I wasn't good enough. And when the time came to showcase my voice, I had cracked. So here I am 1 year later, on a now raised stage, preparing to sing again. The music starts and the rest of the choir joins in. I open my mouth and I start to sing. I'm doing it. I'm not laughing or crying or running off stage. I'm continuing and I'm making a sound. Yes. The thing is, I'm making an absolutely awful sound. Beyond terrible. And I mean it when I say that I absolutely ruined the whole choir. I was the loudest, the worst. The entire audience starts roaring with laughter as I'm belting out and destroying any sense of melody or harmony. I'm cringing inside. They think I'm really bad. This is terrible. I finally got to sing, and this is what happens. Now, the thing is about this show. The whole point of my role in this performance. See, although I was singing, this was exactly what I had been asked to do. This was an acting part, and I was playing the role of the girl who can't sing. So the audience is laughing and I'm cringing inside, but pleased that I'm doing a good job at being a bad singer. And although I didn't know it at the time, I had in that moment been given the perfect opportunity to recover from the stage fright of singing solo in front of an audience. And whilst this was extremely annoying for my 11-year-old self, protesting in her mind, but I can sing! And still upset about the last time I ran off stage after crying and laughing and thinking that the whole world, which at this moment consists of the entire of Carfield School juniors, still didn't know of the truth of the voice inside me. However, having now played the parts of the girl who wouldn't sing and the girl who couldn't sing to a T, belting out my best bad version of whatever song it was that we were singing, and perfectly ruining the choir as intended, was actually one of the most helpful things in solving the problem. What I didn't realise was, at this moment, I was freed of my stage fright. With the freedom for people to hear me sing bad, extremely bad, on purpose, I could now more easily show them my good. I could see the comedy in it all. And it didn't really matter how I sounded or was perceived, or even if I was heard at all. And with my newfound courage, I went on, with the help of singing lessons and support from my friends, to perform and sing many solos, including Gloria Gaynor's I Will Survive, singing with my real voice at my fullest, my true voice. First I was afraid, I was petrified. I'd now found my voice, dancing away with bright and happy vocals at the Montgomery Theatre and moving to the rhythm of I Will Survive. And now, at 30 years old, having sung many parts on many stages and going on to fulfill my dream to train professionally in musical theatre and as a performance and life coach, it is my joy to share this wisdom with others, to not fear being heard or having a moment, sounding bad, sounding good, or not being heard at all. As long as you keep trying and you give it a go, it's all part of the fun of it, and it's all really contributing towards your unique story and journey of finding your voice.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
That's
Great
the
story.
story of the girl who couldn't sing. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, I've heard this story a few times, and I think you've got the twist in the story. It's coming over really well now. Because the expectation is that you would be, that you would be successful and do a beautiful second performance. And of course, and then it sounds like it's going to get even worse. That sort of movement makes it a compelling story. How did you find it, David?
Yes, I agree. It was intriguing the way the story went backwards. You start off in the present moment, and then you go back a year, and then going back a year, you're in another sort of Russian doll. You're going back into your classmates, your rivals' story about when she sang opera, and you were looking up at her with jealousy and admiration. So it's quite intriguing. You're pulling us around. I like that.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued to know what you're doing
that was one of the
now.
things,
What you've been singing like before lockdown. Music theatre, yeah.
Yeah. So
Sorry,
I
I just
trained
missed
in
that.
musical theatre, but now I trained in musical theatre. I went to a school in London and did musical theatre, but at the moment, I write my own songs, which I've done even at the time when I was singing. I think I would have been writing songs around when I was 10 and 11. So I think that the kind of, I suppose there's a kind of desperation of her wanting to, I'm calling myself her in the past, my younger self, having this secret life of, being able to write and sing songs. And I did do performances, so it's not that people didn't hear me sing. It was just that the school setting, they didn't know me as a singer, if that makes any sense. But I knew myself. Yeah. I knew I had a voice, and I wanted to share that with my friends. And I think, I don't know, like, I think it was something that I also wanted to kind of think of possible. So when I'm working with clients, and a lot of people that come to me do have this desire to be heard and to share their songs with people, whether that be their own songs or, just singing in general. And they want to find their voice a bit more so that they can feel more confident to put stuff out there. And one of the things that stops people from putting stuff out there is the fear of being bad or getting it wrong or sounding, not as good, or having a moment where they freeze, or, you know what I mean? So I suppose the story is just to show that even if that does happen, you just carry on and try again, sort of thing.
It reminds me of what's sometimes called icebreakers. You kind of get people doing silly things. There's a kind of theatre called forum theatre, and it's usually preceded with a number of ridiculous things that get people to kind of laugh, and it's a bit like sort of, drinking alcohol to the party without drinking. just getting them to just relax and chill and be silly. Yeah, that's great. And then you really show that in your story. Yeah. You really bring it out.
Thanks. Okay. So Chris, you've got a story about, is it your parents' music or something? Something to do with your parents and music?
Yes. So this is the relaxed and silly part of this program. And the invitation to you two, and indeed to all our listeners, is if when I touch on certain tunes in this story, if you wish to join in, the words are da-di-da-di-da-di-da. So, I know as musicians you probably never do that. Some of my words will be, because I'm conveying the tune. I'm not a musician, you should know. I can't play the piano or the trumpet or the brass trombone or anything like that. But music has been with me all my life. Now, if you listen to Radio 4 on Saturday morning, just after 10 o'clock, there's a little insert into the Saturday Live programme called Inheritance Tracks. And the idea is you choose a celebrity or well-known person chooses one track that they inherited from those who were around them when they were young. and also chooses a track that they wish to pass on to future generations. So that's roughly what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do it differently because you're not going to get the music in the background, but I will put links to YouTube versions in the info that goes with this podcast. So my father used to shave, and he did a wet shave. Now I've asked people, the men in rooms, how many of them actually wet shave these days, and most people just use an electric razor now. And wet shaving was. But occasionally you get a man who does actually shave, I don't know where I was now. My father, as a little kid, I used to watch my father shave, and he'd be there in the bathroom in his vest, and he'd get the bar of shaving soap, which is a sort of cylinder about an inch in diameter, with some foil around the bottom of it, and he made a lather in a little dish with that. And then he had the shaving brush, and if you remember those or use those now, they have a soft inner hairs and then the darker outside hairs, which apparently are badger bristles, and they keep the softer hairs upright. And then he dipped them in the lather and then apply it over whichever parts of your face you're going to shave. And as he did all of this, he would sing. And he sang all manner of songs. And I'm going to attempt part of one of his favourite songs, which went like this. A preacher went out walking, 'twas on a Sunday morn. It was against his religion, but he took his gun along. He shot himself some mighty fine quail and one little measly hare. But on his way returning home, he met a great big grizzly bear. The story goes on that he runs away from the bear and he takes refuge in a tree. And then the glorious chorus, and if you know it, you can join it. Oh Lord, you delivered Daniel from the lion's den. You delivered Jonah from the belly of the whale, and then the Hebrew children from the fiery furnace, so the good book do declare. So Lord, if you can't help me, for goodness sakes don't help that bear. And you can imagine, as a small child, I loved that. And the I can't remember how it all resolves, but he gets his razor out and he ends up wrestling with the bear, and the chorus comes up again. That was one of his lovely songs. But then he would get the safety razor, and he'd put the blade in the razor, and he would start to shave. And very often, as he did the shaving, he would whistle a particular tune. And this is my first inheritance track. And I just know how rare it is these days that you hear people whistling. In the 50s and 60s, you might remember this, David, people seemed to whistle all the time. You'd be walking along the street and you'd hear somebody whistling. I mean, I wouldn't dare do that too publicly these days because people would think you're a bit odd. Although I do whistle when the wind's blowing and I'm on my own. In fact, I've been practicing this as I've been walking. I've just had a tooth out as well, so my whistling isn't quite as, feels a bit strange at the moment, but this is the tune. Do any of you know it? It's quite a challenge.
Is there a hymn? Is it a hymn?
No, it's not. Well, it's not a hymn, but you've got the tune. Da 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 dee da 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 dee da 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 da. It's not a hymn.
Is it opera?
It's from opera, yes. It's called Musetta's Waltz.
Ah.
and it's from La Bohème, which is one of my favourite operas, mainly because it's a tearjerker. And even when I talk about it generally, as I'm going to do now, I begin to sort of choke up. And it's a great opera to see if you want a good cry in public. But Musetta is a comic character. And she sings this beautiful waltz. And listening to it as my father whistled it as he was shaving in the bathroom, I always thought it was a sort of romantic song. And it is, except that the context in which it is played is outside Christmas Eve in the square. That's my Christmas reference. And Musetta comes in. She's a bit of a coquette, and she's got this elderly man with her. And she accidentally breaks the heel on her shoe and sends him off because her ex-lover is in the crowd. This is the secondary couple in the opera, and she decides she's going to re-seduce him, and she sings this song. So it's actually a comic scene, and well done. It's both moving and hilariously funny, but you wouldn't expect that from just hearing the tune. And Musetta is a brilliant comic character. The row she has with her, I can't remember the name of her partner, but she has a row with her partner in Act 3 while the other two are breaking up. And she also delivers in Act 4 the most heart-rending line in the whole of theatre. So it's actually an amazing part for someone who might be a comedy actor and singer, because there's so much emotional stuff going on, often in the background, or her background. But so that is my first choice. For what I'd pass on in the future, paradoxically, I want to go back into early life again and talk about my mother. And my mother didn't really sing very much or whistle or anything like that, but she listened to music. And the music she listened to was on the BBC Light programme, which sort of evolved into Radio 2 in the end. And loads of shows where they played record requests, and they all had amazing signature tunes. So you may well recognise this one. Da 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 da. Neither of you is nodding, so obviously, David, you were around about that same time. That was Housewife's Choice, 5 mornings a week, and then
that became
and then you get
Hour,
something Sunday lunchtime, David. No, Woman's Hour was quite separate. This was a record request program.
Oh yes, that's radio,
and then another record request program.
Anyway.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, another request program was on Sunday lunchtime with a song in my heart. Da da dee da 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 dee da da dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da 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 da. Do you remember that, David?
I don't. Do you know there was probably a class thing going on because I just listened to, or my parents just listened to Radio 4.
That was two-way family favourites, and the whole point of it was people in Britain would make record requests to the family members who were in the armed forces overseas. And so that it would go something like Fred Bloggs and then BFPO number 673 or whatever. BFPO was British Forces Post Office. And that program was heard all over the world. In fact, I told this story a couple of years ago, and there was an elderly Australian in the audience, and he knew the tune and the program because he'd heard it in Australia. So that was the world that my mother inhabited. She died in 1988, and in the early 90s, I was beginning to, because I was into classical music and opera and so on, but in the early 90s, I started to think, what are all these tunes that are in my head from childhood? And I couldn't place them. I didn't know whether they were musicals or I didn't know about the American Songbook at that time, but I didn't know. So I decided to find out more, and there's a part work came out about jazz. So I thought, well, that's be a good place to start. I can work out what jazz is, and and then see what's left over. But jazz was a good choice because a lot of these tunes are picked up by jazz players and used. Now, to cut a longish story short, the one particular musician stood out for me, and that musician was Nat Cole. Now, you might know his name. It's probably better known now as Nat King Cole, but the King was a nickname, really. But Nat King Cole, in later life, I think it was his third marriage, his wife said to him, you better get off your backside and start earning some money. So he went from jazz into backgrounds of strings and so on. And he had a beautiful voice, like if you imagine hot milk and honey in its most pleasant version, that there was that sweetness to his voice. And they did a thing a few years ago looking for the 100 best vocalists of the 20th century, and he became in number one. But I prefer the younger Nat Cole, who had a jazz trio. So he played piano, and there was a guitar and double bass, and he played a lot of very lively music and tunes, including this one, which you might recognise. Get your coat and get your hat, leave your worries on the doorstep. Let me guide your feet to the side of the street that's sunny. And I remember the first time I heard him sing that, and I thought he's got the last line wrong. It should be on the sunny side of the street, because that's the name of the song. And but that struck me and stayed with me. And that is almost my inheritance track, except during the 1990s, another vocalist appeared on the scene, and a jazz vocalist. And this particular vocalist set up a jazz trio, piano. They played piano and guitar and double bass, and they issued an album covering Nat Cole. And it's that vocalist version that is my inheritance track. And her name was Diana Krall. And she played the tunes, not exactly, apparently she put in modern jazz notes. I'm not quite sure what the difference is between modern jazz notes and old-fashioned ones, but she added those. And her life sort of mirrored Nat Cole's, because she married Elvis Costello, and now her more recent work has got string backings, and she's much more of a vocalist. But back in the day, she played the piano in her trio, and her voice was about, if you can imagine a beautiful voice that's the opposite of Nat Cole, where Nat Cole was smooth and sweet, she is quite a harsh, dark. If he is milk and honey, hers is espresso, a dark, double, triple strength espresso. And it's that beautiful dark intonation that really transforms that tune. So Diana Krall's version of Nat Cole's version of The Sunny Side of the Street is my second inheritance track. That's it.
Ooh, thanks. I think I've sung a Diana Krall song before. My singing teacher gave me one of her tracks, so yeah, I love it. I love
you know her.
Yeah. And I loved how I like the espresso honey milk, using cups of milk or tea or coffee to describe voices. I quite like that metaphor.
Synesthesia, isn't it?
Yeah, it's nice. I might end up using it, moving forward, or tell people your voice is an expression. Your voice is funny, but yeah. I mean, I love a good song, so I think for me that story was just really enlivening and joyous, and I love to hear you talk about your childhood and the songs that your family brought to you. I think it's just helped me to understand Chris a little bit more, and yeah, loved it.
Thank you.
I liked the raggledy nature of the story. You're never quite sure where it's going. It's a slightly sort of shaggy dog story, and so that's intriguing. Of sort of following a thread, and it's going this direction and then that direction. And I was left for a long time with the image of your dad in his string vest in front of the mirror, just trying to have a shave. And I can remember my dad having a shave with those safety razors, carefully putting the blade in between two clamps and screwing them on, and preparing the lather. It's like, what's happened to all that? Because it's recently I've taken shaving again. I just shave straight on a slightly wet beard, or sometimes if it's a bit rough, I'll just put a bit of soap on it and just rub it in with my fingers. I don't bother with all that. Is it because the razors are different, or because we're lazier, or because the culture kind of lost that sort of a ritual culture of shaving? I don't know what it is.
I think there was a ritual to it. Yeah. I mean, and that's possibly why I've got a full beard. Well, not quite a full beard, because I just couldn't be bothered with all that palaver every day. I mean, it was every day that she shaved.
It says something about our routines, and how sort of we seem to be full of labor-saving devices that have made us more enslaved to the technology. I mean, I'm on my phone all the time. There was a time then when you got ready for the day. I remember that the whole bathroom, getting the family getting ready for the day, the whole bathroom routine, and it was something completely separate from the rest of the day. And the rest of the day didn't start until something had finished. Well, now it's all over the place, isn't it? Well,
my father shaved in the evening,
and knickers in the other.
So he wasn't sort of queuing up for the bathroom in the morning trying to get to work. He did it in the evening when more freedom. Yeah,
sensible.
Yeah. So, do you have memories of your father shaving, Jemma? Or does that?
Yeah, I don't know if I've paid enough attention.
I'm not sure whether you're with us.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember my father shaving, but it's not a memory that's particularly sticks out as. I mean, my dad sings and plays. He's a musician as well. Plays guitar and lots of instruments, actually, harmonica, drum, he's just multi-instrumental. My dad. So I have lots of memories of him singing, practicing songs over and over, doing them over and over again. And he's just kind of like I suppose a background. If there's going to, how in films you have background music playing. Well, my dad has provided a lot of the background music in my life, just because he plays music all the time, whether it's him playing his own or just putting on, music from all around the world. So I got a really good musical background, which I'm quite pleased. And my mum plays instruments as well.
I think yes. I mean, music was was always the background. Either my mother listening to the radio or my father singing, and that was how it was. And clearly, if you've got professional musicians in the family, it's it was there for you as well. Okay, I think that just about wraps us up, and so we'll be back in January at some stage. So watch out for us. And so that's goodbye from me. And David is going to play us out on his trumpet. So it's goodbye from me and Jemma.
And goodbye from me. Thank you so much, David, for telling your story and being a guest on our podcast. We really appreciate it, and looking forward to hearing you play some music to play us out.
Thank you very much,
David.
Thank you for asking me onto the program, so I could tell my story and Reem's story, make a connection with people in Gaza. So Chris talked about "Sunny Side of the Street" as Nat Cole sang it. I'll do a version. I haven't warmed up, so it'll be sort of split notes and all. But here we go.